every time somebody calls me an icon, I think, well, maybe that's the sort of this thing to retire or whatever, but I'm not going any place. And the only iconic thing I've done is grow my hair, which is the reason I'm an icon. Navdeep, Vidya, thank you so much for being here. Navdeep, this particular piece of work, you have come to it after a while, but we'll come to that in a second. Tell us a little bit about Nanak Singh. I don't know whether any of you know the movie Pavitra Papi by any chance? Anybody? One person. So Nanak Singh was one of Punjab's greatest writers. He seemed to be one of Punjab's greatest contemporary writers. And, but he wasn't literate, right?
So my grandfather, Nanak Singh, had a very difficult childhood. He was born in what is now the Jhelum district in Pakistan. And he was barely 9 when his father, who had a small grocery store in Peshawar, also now in Pakistan, asked him to come, drop his studies and come and help out in the store. So he was unable to complete his education beyond the 4th grade. And the joke in the family and in his interviews used to be, well, I don't know whether I'm 4th pass or 5th fail, but that's about how much education I got. And the reason I think this is interesting is not only the fact that he ended up producing a staggering 59 books, including 38 novels, and plays, and short stories, and poetry, and translations. But a couple of years back, we were setting up a Nanak Singh Literary Center in the Guru Nanak Dev University in Amritsar. And we started collecting the dissertations that have been done on his work. And at last count, we had 67 dissertations on various aspects of his writings. So for a man without any formal education, that's pretty significant.
And he was born into a Hindu family.
Yeah, he was born into a Hindu family. His father's name was Bahadur Chand Suri. You know, as he writes in his own autobiography, which was first published in 1949, he says that he knew from early times that he had a certain talent for putting verses together and for music, but that was also put to the wrong kind of use, and he became very popular with some wayward friends to come and entertain them at their parties and so on. And so he describes himself as a teenager who was looking for a purpose in life, and he meets this very pious, very spiritual Granthi, the priest at the local Gurdwara in Peshawar, and under his influence, he not only starts going to the Gurudwara regularly, but actually converts to Sikhism. So Hansraj becomes Nanak Singh, which is the name that he took at the age of 17. And then with the zeal of the new convert, he proceeds to put his talent for poetry to good use. And he produces this work called Satgur Mehma, which were hymns that he wrote in praise of the Sikh gurus. And that became such a runway bestseller that it also encouraged him to move from Peshawar to Amritsar, which, of course, as you know, is the center of the Sikh faith.
And this particular piece of work became iconic. Every wedding, etc., it was sort of given as dowry.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, the stories that we've heard growing up, that people almost treated it with the sanctity of a holy book. And they would wash their hands before picking up a copy, and it would be wrapped in velvet cloth and all of that. Yeah, and in those days, I'm talking about 1918 to 20 kind of, it sold hundreds of thousands of copies.
And at what point did he move from that to actually writing the work that he did? He was in jail for a while as part of the protest movement.
So he went to jail in 1922 as part of what is known as the Guru Ka Bagh Morcha, which is a struggle to win back the control of the Sikh Gurudwaras, the Sikh temples, from British-appointed priests. And he participated. He was imprisoned, taken to jail in Lahore, spent about 8 months, 8.5 months in jail. And while he was in jail, there was a prominent prisoner, a guy called Pandit Jagat Ram, who was a Congress party freedom fighter and who had enough political clout, I guess, to be able to bring in a trunk load of books to keep him occupied in prison. And so my grandfather, then 24, 25 years old, starts reading Munshi Premchand's novels in jail. And as he reads them, he says, this is what I really want to do with my life. I want to start writing novels that will bring about social reform and try and change society. And he starts writing his very first book while he's still in prison, goes halfway through it, and then there's a raid on the cell, and the jailer comes and confiscates it. And that first novel that could have been is lost, and he waits for another 18 years until 1940 when he proceeds to rewrite that particular novel. But he doesn't wait that long. Otherwise, he gets out of jail, and in 1923 he writes his first novel called Matarai Ma, or Stepmother. And that book is still in circulation. It's still part of the Punjabi literature curriculums in schools and colleges.
And at which point of time did you come to his writing? Were you I mean, as a kid, you must have been with him in Preet Village and...
So, you know, he passed away when I was 12, and our childhood memories are of spending summer vacations in our little village, Preet Nagar, about 18 miles from Amritsar, and getting him to tell us stories without any real appreciation that we were listening to Punjab's greatest storyteller who was entertaining us kids as we sat around a fire or sat around him. And, you know, to be honest, while growing up, I read some of his books, but we were fairly complacent in not even acknowledging the rich legacy that we had. And it wasn't until I was posted actually in Washington as a diplomat, and that happened to be his centenary year in 1997. 1997. And I.K. Gujral was the Prime Minister of India at that time, and he was a Punjabi, and he was a great fan of Nanak Singh's books. And he decides to celebrate the centenary in a big way, releases a postage stamp and a first-day cover and all kinds of stuff. And there's journal reporting in the ethnic media and the Indian media and all about these events. And somewhere the news spreads that Nanak Singh's grandson happens to be a diplomat at the Indian embassy. And I started getting invitations from all sorts of community associations in Chicago, in Los Angeles, in Miami, and so on, saying, will you come? We are doing an event to celebrate your grandfather. And there I would show up, sometimes not even having read some of the books, and I'd hear particularly elderly women saying, with a degree of reverence that I was completely unprepared for, saying that growing up in Punjab, we read Punjabi so that we could read his novels, or we learned Punjabi by reading his novels. And somewhere that penny dropped that, man, this is the kind of legacy that we've been taking for granted. And that sort of pushed me, partly with a lot of encouragement from my mother, to start taking up his books for translation. My mother herself, she was a professor of Punjabi literature and language at Khalsa College in Amritsar. And she would keep telling me that it's not me talking as daughter-in-law, but me talking as a teacher of Punjabi language, that your grandfather was one heck of a genius of a storyteller. And if only his works could reach a wider audience. And you may have the capacity to do that. So I started translating some of his works, and that's how we started.
And before you started translating, primarily as a diplomat, you used to do a lot of fiction writing as diplomat dispatches from Washington back to India, right?
This is what we do for a living. All right. We put on our rose-tinted glasses, and we make the word sound much better than it is.
Navdeep, give us a setting of this particular Khooni Vaisakhi. Tell us what it was at that beginning that the poem is set in. For those of you, how many of you have been to Amritsar and to Jallianwala Bagh, to the Bagh itself? That's amazing.
Yeah.
And, you know, we spoke about this in Houston yesterday or day before. And one of the things that came through, a lot of people may have visited it, but they didn't really know the context. And that's something that this particular seminal, I call it a dirge, it's a ballad, it's in a ballad form, sets. It is one of the finest pieces of writing you will read, which will give you an understanding of what led to the massacre. So it sets the scene, it tells you what happened in the massacre, and then, of course, in the aftermath, which is what we're going to explore. But set the scene for us, Navdeep.
So, as I said, my grandfather at the age of 21 had moved from Peshawar to Amritsar, fairly engaged, and next thing we know is that, you know, there are these protests taking place against the Rowlatt Act. For those who don't know, the Rowlatt Act was a particularly nasty piece of legislation written up by a gentleman called Sir Sidney Rowlatt. It essentially meant a complete suppression of all civil liberties. For those who can understand Hindi, it used to be called no dalil, no vakil, no appeal. Anybody could be arrested at any time and put in jail for no explanation whatsoever, and you didn't have any recourse to law. So this Rowlatt bill was coming up, and there were protests taking place. Gandhiji was actually the one who gave the calls for hartal or strike across India on the 6th of April, 1919. And post those strikes, the people of Amritsar, you know, there were a bunch of other events, but the people of Amritsar decided that on the 13th of April, which was also Vaisakhi day, they would go into this large enclosed compound called Jallianwala Bagh, which is barely a stone's throw from the Golden Temple, and a stone's throw from where I was born, to protest against the Rowlatt Act. And my grandfather, with two of his friends, went there, and in the, you know, as was said in the introduction, the British troops were led by Brigadier General Dyer, Reginald Dyer, and he, without giving any warning, told his troops to start firing into this group of about 15 to 20,000 innocent, unarmed civilians who had come there to protest against a British piece of legislation. And both my grandfather's friends were killed in that firing that took place, amongst the 1,000 or so who were killed. And my grandfather was knocked unconscious in the stampede that immediately started as people started running helter-skelter for cover. And he recovered, walked away from there, from the dead, literally. And in early 1920, he published this poem called Khooni Vaisakhi, which is a remarkable chronological account of events in Amritsar in that fateful first fortnight of April 1919. It almost tells us, scene by scene, how the mood in the city develops.
Perhaps you would read, let's invoke the blessings of the gurus, and perhaps you could read the opening, and then we would request Vidya, who really put this to music in a day or so. Harpreet, who had been commissioned to do the music, sadly hasn't been our same issue, Rachel. We haven't got his visa. So history repeats itself, but we had the wonderful Vidya in town. We requested her to do that. So if you open with that. A
big thanks to Vidya for stepping up at such short notice.
I think you should save it for the end.
So here's Nanak Singh, 22 years old, survived the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, writing this poem. And he starts writing with an invocation to the 10th Guru, Guru Gobind Singh. And it's an invocation which, it shows he almost had a sense that he's writing for posterity, that he's witnessed something so horrendous. He wants people to know forever the sacrifices that were made on that particular day. So he starts off the poem, "O Father mine with the turban plumed, I bow at thy feet, my divine Guru. Messiah of the meek, Savior of the poor, my divine Guru. Grant me thy cup of love and blessings, uplift my spirits, my divine Guru. Let my pen fly across the pages to tell this tale, my divine Guru, of innocent souls laying down their lives for our nation's sake, my divine Guru, and those with wounds still bleeding and raw get showered with salt, my divine Guru. To pen a portrait of those departed ones, grant me the strength, my divine Guru, to remind my people across India, lest we forget their sacrifice, my divine Guru, to write the saga of our heroes such. Your disciple is ready, my divine Guru. Do help me complete this mission of mine. Nanak Singh beseeches, O my divine Guru.
Okay.
फोटो खिंच के विछड़े सजना दा रख दिया मैं विच संसार सतगुरु याद फेर करा दिया हिंद ताई मता देन ना दिलो विसार सतगुरु दासतां शहीदां दी दासतां शहीदां दी लिखने नू दास दास आपदा होया त्यार सतगुरु तोड़ चाड़ना तोड़ चाड़ना अपनी मेहर करके नानक सिंह एह करे नानक सिंह ए करे पुकार सतगुरु
Ladies and gentlemen, Vidya Shah. Some of you may have caught yesterday's performance that Vidya did for the Engendered Conference with Gramophone, Women on Gramophone. And if you haven't, please do go to her website. And she's one of the most incredible classical singers of our contemporary times, Vidya Shah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sanjoy. Thank you.
Navdeep, you began translating this poem. That's not easy. I mean, you translated from Punjabi to English, but English doesn't necessarily have the kind of vocabulary that you need to look at the nuance of Punjabi writing. How tough was that, and what's the sort of trick that you used? And this is not open verse either.
Yeah, and on top of that, I had no real talent for translating poetry in any case. So, it doesn't...
Diplomats don't do poetry, they only do prose.
Yeah, and diplomats do fictitious reports, right? When we decided to, but my mom decided and I kind of agreed that let's work on this because the centenary of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre was coming up in 2019. So that gave a nice little motivation to work on this project. So initially, I thought the most important thing for me is to capture the meaning of the poem that my grandfather has written and to capture the emotion and the passion that his words reflect. And there was this temptation to depart from the fact that he takes a very specific rhyme and meter, to abandon that cadence and try and do something in free verse, which probably would have been easier, but somewhere this feeling was there that these poems were meant to be recited aloud. And in fact, this poem was again part of this genre of protest poetry that was quite popular at the time of British rule. And so fairly early in the process, I decided that no, I want to try and challenge myself and stick to the same rhyme scheme and meter that is there in the original. And what it does when you're translating is that the vocabulary available to you for any particular scene that you want to describe or emotion that you want to describe is dramatically limited. It shrinks because now you are also trying to find words that rhyme in that same manner that you want to capture. And so you do get yourself into that bind, and sometimes you find some tricks to play around with it. In this case, I think my grandfather fortuitously made the job easier because, as you will see, in many of his poems, like the piece that we just read, every second, fourth, sixth line ends with Satguru. So that lends itself quite easily to my divine guru, right? But in other cases, he tends to use words like yaro or pyare, which was quite popular as form in that form of poetry. And so I take some liberties with that, but yeah, and hopefully it works.
Was there a eureka moment when you were able to crack this in your head?
Yeah, one was that because in several of the poems within this ballad, my grandfather's, the original ends with either my friends or pyare, which is my dears. You could then extend that to even some other sections which didn't lend themselves to any other translation. But I think with the eureka moment for me, and the point where I really struggled, and I hope we'll have Vidya bring that up, is towards the end of the poem, towards the end of the ballad, there are these letters that my grandfather presents, that, and in Punjabi, they are called chithiyan dardan diyan. These are letters of anguish that the public, the ordinary folks on the street are writing to the British Raj, saying, what have you done to us? Look at the way you've treated us. And I was kind of stuck in that groove of letters of anguish, because that's when I looked at dard as the word, anguish was the closest that came. And the eureka moment one morning was, I can't do it if I keep thinking of letters of anguish, but if I change it to postcards of pain, then my job as a translator becomes that much easier because suddenly there's a lot more words that match or rhyme with pain that I can use to my advantage. So I guess this is a little trick that you can use to play around and maybe use a bit of imagination to make the job feasible.
Did you want to read the second?
So this is a very graphic account of the firing at Jallianwala Bagh, and then its aftermath. It starts with this. 5:30 sharp, the clock had struck. Thousands gathered in the Bagh, my friends. Leaders came to lament the nation's woes, taking turns to speak out loud, my friends. voiced grievance, hardship, anger, sorrow, saying no one listens to us, my friends. What can we do? What options left? Can't see any ray of light, my friends. Those words forlorn, they barely voiced, came soldiers thundering down, my friends. At Dyer's command, those Gurkha troops gathered in a formation tight, my friends. Under tyrants' orders, they opened fire straight into innocent hearts, my friends, and fire and fire and fire they did. Some thousands of bullets were shot, my friends. Like searing hail, they felled our youth. Like searing hail, they felled our youth, a tempest not seen before, my friends. Riddled chests and bodies slid to the ground, each one a target large, my friends. Haunting cries for help did rend the sky. Smoke rose from smoldering guns, my friends. Just a sip of water was all they sought. Valiant youth lay dying in the dust, my friends. That narrow lane to enter the Bagh, sealed off on Dyer's command, my friends. No exit, no escape, no way out was left, making Bagh a deathly trap, my friends. A fortunate few somehow survived, while most died then and there, my friends. Some ran with bullets ripping their chest, stumbling to their painful end, my friends. Others caught the bullet while running away, dropping lifeless in awkward heaps, my friends. In minutes, the Bagh, so strewn with corpses, none knew just who was who, my friends. Many of them did look like Sikhs. Amid Hindus and Muslims, plenty, my friends. In prime of their youth, our brave hearts lay, gasping for one last breath, my friends. Long hair lay matted in blood and grime. In slumber deep they sleep, my friends. Says Nanak Singh, who knows their state, but God, the one and only, my friends. And it goes on to describe the scene the next day. With faces drawn and muffled sobs, they sift through the corpses in silent fear. Like moth on a flame, hearts burn to ashes on seeing the fate of sons so dear. Ah, the pain of losing a child so precious, like heart is pierced with dagger or spear. Grief inconsolable melts toughest of souls. Even faces most stoic shed tear after tear. Vidya, is that the section that you're going to sing for us?
I was actually very, very, emotionally, quite actually, not just moved, almost disturbed when I read the one about people wailing as they bring the corpses of the loved ones. So perhaps if you could just read a few lines from that as well. Then.
And if you can do both, Navdeep, give people a sense of the Punjabi and do the English.
ਮੁਰਦੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਸੀਨੇ ਨਾਲ ਲਾ ਕੇ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਹਾਏ ਇਹ ਜ਼ੁਲਮ ਅੱਜ ਹੋਣਾ ਸੀ ਮੇਰੇ ਲਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਵਾਰੀਆਂ ਜਾਗ ਛੇਤੀ ਜੰਗਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਆ ਕੇ ਕਾਨੂੰ ਸੌਵਣਾ ਸੀ ਬਿਨਾਂ ਪੁੱਛਿਆਂ ਲੰਬੜੇ ਰਾਹ ਪਿਓ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸ ਕੇ ਵਿਦਾ ਹੋਣਾ ਸੀ ਰਤਾ ਅਸਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਾਥ ਉਡੀਕ ਲੈਂਦੋ ਘੜੀ ਦੋ ਘੜੀ ਚਾਈ ਖਲੋਵਣਾ ਸੀ ਜੇਕਰ ਆ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ ਤੇਰਾ ਕਾਲ ਬੱਚਾ ਮਾਈ ਬਾਪ ਨੂੰ ਅੱਗੇ ਚਾ ਢੋਵਣਾ ਸੀ ਨਾਨਕ ਸਿੰਘ ਪਰ ਲਿਖੇ ਨੂੰ ਕੌਣ ਮੇਟੇ ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਹੁਕਮ ਕਰਤਾਰ ਦਾ ਹੋਵਣਾ ਸੀ
English.
Thank you. Clutching lifeless bodies of precious sons, parents mourn the abject horrors of the day. My child, oh, wake up just once more. What makes you sleep in a place so grey? You left us alone for a voyage so long. No goodbye you've said, nor farewell did you say. Couldn't you wait just a little while longer to let us join you on your eternal way? If time indeed had come to part, your parents could join without delay. Says Nanak Singh, you can't fight fate. When the master orders, you just obey.
This is the one which says, people wailing as they bring the corpses of loved ones. So I'll attempt the Punjabi. ਸੰਬੰਧੀਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਢੂੰਡਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਮੁਰਦੀਆਂ ਵੱਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਮਾਪੇ ਵੇਖ ਕੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਹਾਏ ਹਾਏ ਵਾਂਗ ਪਤੰਗੇ ਦੇ ਜਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਮੋਏ ਲਾਡਲੇ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਪੁੱਤ ਯਾਰੋ ਸੀਨੇ ਨਾਲ ਕਟਾਰੀਆਂ ਸਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਪੱਥਰ ਵਾਂਗ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੜੇ ਦਿਲ ਪੱਥਰ ਨੀਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਅੱਖੀਓਂ ਚਲ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਰੋਂਦੇ ਪਿੱਟਦੇ ਲੋਕ ਸਮਝਿਆ ਨੂੰ। Thank you. Thank you.
Did you want to just give the translation of that? Okay. So, Navdeep, one of the things that you said in the earlier verse was you set the scene for us of Jallianwala Bagh. The first time that I went to Amritsar and Jallianwala Bagh was on the occasion where Navdeep's father had passed away. And I went there, but it didn't in any way resonate in the way that you have described it, this narrow entrance, to a fairly dusty bowl. It's changed completely. Is that something that you...
So, yeah, I was actually horrified. So, as part of the centenary commemorations, the government, in its supreme wisdom, decided to do up the park.
Disneyfy it.
So what it meant was, initially we thought, yeah, the place needs better toilets, it needs maybe an interpretation center, it needs some decent facilities because so many people come. But what happened, to my mind, was a desecration of a sacred site. And I wrote a fairly angry and reasoned piece, I think, in the Tribune in Punjab. And I made 3 points why I felt so strongly about it the way I did. One was, as you enter the place today, the entrance has been widened substantially.
With a freeze of happy people.
And you have these freezes on both sides of happy people in what somebody thought was traditional attire, and going to celebrate Vaisakhi. Now, this is ahistorical to me because on the 12th of April, when General Dyer did a flag march through the city and he had these people, the town criers, making an announcement imposing Section 144 in Amritsar, which meant that no more than 4 persons could gather at any place, and curfew being imposed from that evening. So yes, the 13th of April was Vaisakhi, but the reason my grandfather called it the Khooni Vaisakhi was that it wasn't a normal Vaisakhi harvest festival celebration that you would see. And the people who were gathered there largely were there to protest against the Rowlatt Act.
And the arrest of Kichlu.
And the arrest of the 2 of the town's leaders. The second thing that offended me was that as you're entering, you now have patriotic music blaring at you from speakers all over. And, you know, to me, it's like somebody's playing around with my mood, my emotion. I remember going repeatedly as a kid and as somebody growing up in that city and seeing the feeling of sort of reflection that it would evoke in you. And later as a diplomat, you know, having visited the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem and in New York, having seen the Commonwealth graves.
And the Apartheid Museum.
And the Apartheid Museum in Johannesburg and so on. These places are done very respectfully to preserve a memory and to encourage you to reflect on what happened at that point of time. I think what we've done in the process is we want people to feel nationalistic, we want them to feel patriotic as they enter there. And instead of retaining the original character of the place, what you have is almost selfie spots and people picnicking and so on. But to me, the biggest shock was we completed our tour, my wife and I, of the site, and we were almost programmed, hardwired, that there's only one entry point and that's the exit point, right? That's what the poem also says. And as we were coming back, the security guard says, no, the exit is that way. I had looked at him, sort of speechless. What? And yes, they've created a whole new, different exit into a different street completely, supposedly to make it convenient for visitors and tourists. And my regret is that how can you mess with the historical character of the place? It was a killing field because there was no exit. So, you know, you've just changed that thing around so completely.
You know, one of the things that everybody gravitates towards in Jallianwala Bagh is the well, because there's so many stories around it.
Yeah, so the well is something that looms large in popular stories. If those of you have seen films like Shahid Udham Singh and so on, you've got these very graphic scenes of people jumping into the well to save themselves from the bullets being fired, of women and children jumping into the well. And then the legends that the well almost had a crimson hue because so many people, wounded people, had jumped in and died. I think there's a bit of a historical exaggeration there. A bit of mythology has crept in over the decades. None of the evidence that I have seen suggests that a large number of people fell or willingly jumped into the well. What we are aware of is that maybe the power of a 303 gun rifle being fired at you can knock you physically back into the backwards and you fall in the well. And so probably some wounded people did fall in the well. And yes, there was blood in the well. But actually the overwhelming amount of killing happened either in the plain area of the park, or next to the wall at the back, which is about 5 feet high, and people are trying to scale it to get to safety. And General Dyer told the troops to fire straight towards the wall to prevent the people from escaping. And you know, a 303 bullet can go through one and through another. And so next to the wall, you had actually piles of bodies 3-4 deep that were there. But the well itself, I think, important as it is, I think sometimes in our narratives perhaps is exaggerated. And I didn't find any substantive reference to it in the poem as well.
Navdeep, most governments or most people think that the arts don't matter, but in this case, you know, the poem was so powerful. What was the British reaction to this when it was published?
So what we know is that very soon after it was published, it was banned, and all copies that were on sale were confiscated. And for the next 60 years, from 1920 to 1980, we knew that there was a missing work from my grandfather's repertoire, but we had never seen it. And my father, who was a publisher, looked for it, made several efforts, but never managed to track it down. Until one afternoon, he is reading a magazine called Jagriti, which was quite popular as a literary magazine in Punjab in the 80s and 90s. And he's reading it, and there's an essay by a Professor Gupta about Nanak Singh, the poet, Kavishar Nanak Singh. And my father reads it, and he said he has gooseflesh as he's reading it, because to illustrate Nanak Singh's poetry, there are excerpts from Khooni Vaisakhi that this gentleman has cited in the essay. And my father says, who is this Gupta? How does he have access to Khooni Vaisakhi, a publication that we've been looking for all these years? And he calls the editor of the magazine and says, hey, can you give me this guy's address? And so my dad and my mom, they get on our scooter and are off to the walled city to meet Professor Gupta. And there they hear his story of how he had inherited literally a sack full of pamphlets and old papers from his grandfather. And in that was a copy of Khooni Vaisakhi, which serendipitously, that because Dr. Gupta was also a lecturer of Punjabi language, he spotted the significance that this is a lost work which has never been seen by anyone. So he used those excerpts to publish.
And how did you, when did you actually get a copy of the work?
I have to thank you for that. This was 2019 June. We were in London at the British Library for the JLF at the British Library. And Sanjoy introduced me to the director of the British Library, and I quickly buttonholed him and said, hey, you know, we're going to be talking about this book by my grandfather, Khooni Vaisakhi, which was banned and confiscated in 1920. But knowing how organized and systematic you Brits are, I'm sure would have kept a copy somewhere for the record, no? And the good man went to his databases, and next day comes back saying, you were right. We have a copy in our Yorkshire archives, and it's in a very fragile condition. It's going to take some work to restore it. But I promise you that we'll have it restored and we'll give you a copy. And they were true to their word. And in fact, Sanjoy brought a copy back for me.
What's really interesting, and perhaps for those of you who've read Shashi Tharoor's Era of Darkness, you know, the British recorded everything. They kept every record. So unlike what some of us think that, you know, during the great famines that the British sort of instrumented, only 5 million people died. It was actually 35 million Indians died in the famines that were created and instrumented by the British. And in this one particular case, when this starving person lands up at the doorstep of a Brit and he gives him grain because he doesn't want him to die on his doorstep, he's punished. And he said, if you do this again, we'll ship you back home because they need to understand what this means. So it was totally horrific in the way that it happened. Navdeep, will you, I mean, in British Library, in fact, one of the people who you met was Justin Rowlett.
That's an interesting story, and we have to thank the power of Google for that. So when I was researching into that period of sort of pre-Jallianwala Bagh, trying to understand why were the people of Punjab so angry, the fact that in the First World War from 1914 to 1918, Punjab had contributed 700,000 troops to a war that wasn't ours. 78,000 died. And those who returned with the infamous Spanish flu that again created more devastation. And then you had this gentleman, Sir Sidney Rowlett, coming to do this legislation. And I was interested in getting to know his backstory, who's this guy and what can I know about him. And in that, I purely coincidentally stumbled upon the fact that Sir Sidney's great-grandson, Justin Rowlett, had been the BBC chief correspondent in Delhi and had actually gone to Jallianwala Bagh and shed a tear or two while he was at Jallianwala Bagh, and he wrote a small piece for the BBC website. So when I was working on this, I approached Justin. I got hold of his contact details, introduced myself, and said, would you write something for me? And he did. He was very gracious, and he wrote a piece called For the Sins of My Great-Grandfather. And in that, he writes about his conversation with Gandhiji's grandson, Tushar Gandhi. And, you know, they're talking about why Jallianwala Bagh was so important a milestone, and why the Rowlett Act was so important. And this is, I'm just reading from Justin's piece here since you brought it up. He says, this is Tushar Gandhi saying, the beauty of the Rowlett Act was that Gandhiji didn't have to be a spin doctor to make people understand that it was unjust. It was so transparently malicious in intent that he could use it to create anger, to create resentment, but then channel it towards the kind of protest he wanted it to be, a peaceful protest. In fact, he says, Tushar Gandhi says to Justin, I appreciate your great-grandfather's role to provide the first nail in the coffin of the empire.
Navdeep, before, I mean, we've got a sign to pack up, so I'm going to ask you to read the last bit and ask Vidya to join you. But before that, could you just tell us what happened to Dwyer and Dwyer at the end of all of this? Not quite the Thompson twins, but still two different Dwyers.
Well, I think it's important to know the difference. Lieutenant Governor Michael O'Dwyer was the governor of Punjab, which was the largest province in the British Empire at that time, based out of Lahore. He was a career civil servant and very committed to keeping the natives in their place. And General Dyer, or Brigadier Dyer, was the head of the military regiment in Jalandhar, and was asked to come on the 11th of April to, again, teach the natives a lesson.
And why? Can you just tell us the context of that?
So the context, I think partly, if you want to go back and look at the sequence of events. So on the 6th of April, well, Mahatma Gandhi gives a call for Hartal on the 30th of March. The following Sunday, the 6th of April, there's a widespread strike in many cities across the country, including in Amritsar. And the mood is grim. Yet on the 9th of April, the festival of Ram Navami is being celebrated in Amritsar, and this is to celebrate the birth of Lord Ram. It's a Hindu festival, but the Muslims celebrate it with great gusto in Amritsar. Amritsar is fortunate at that time that the two tallest leaders are a Muslim and a Hindu, Saifuddin Kichlu and Dr. Satyapal. These are the Congress Party stalwarts in Amritsar. And they lead the Ram Navami processions through the street. And the British are so spooked by this show of unity between the Hindus and Muslims and Sikhs that early morning on the 10th of April, both the leaders are arrested and packed off to an unknown destination, which we now know was Dharamsala. As soon as the word spreads in the city, a delegation of the elders of the city say, we are going to go to the deputy commissioner's office and deliver a petition for the release of our leaders. They are on their way out of the walled city, across a railway bridge, towards the civil lines areas where the deputy commissioner's office was. And the British say, you can't cross. And they open fire, and about 27 people are killed right there on the bridge on the 10th of April. As this news spreads in the city, a substantial mob of angry people gather, and they ransack every British establishment in the city that they can access, which means the town hall, the two banks, the post office, and other places. 5 Britishers are killed on that day. And one lady, Marcia Stewart, who was a nun, is assaulted. To the British, the fact that the Indians could resort to this, some of them think that this is harking back to the uprising of 1857. And this needs to be nipped right now. So, Lieutenant Governor Michael O'Dwyer first puts the city under military rule. He takes away the administration's role in the city, and the Deputy Commissioner, Miles Irving, is asked to step aside and make way for the military officer who was in charge in Amritsar. A day later, he decides that this guy is too soft, I need Dyer to come in. So General Dyer is asked to come in, and with a very uncompromising message. And we know all of this, and then, of course, so Dyer goes about doing his warnings, and then on the 13th, without any warning, the firing into this crowd of people. We know all of this because much of it has come out in the Hunter Commission of Inquiry that was set up by the British, which was, to an extent, a whitewash of the real circumstances. But we also know a lot more from the Congress Party's Commission of Inquiry, which was headed by Mahatma Gandhi, who spent over a month in Amritsar, talked to about 1,700 witnesses to produce really a far more detailed account. Coming to what happened, Dyer, because of the outrage that was provoked by this, Dyer is asked to step down. He's recalled. In the British Parliament, there's a fundraising effort to support this stalwart who has defended the Raj. Quite a bit of money is raised for him. But there's still such a backlash building up, particularly in the Labour Party circles and in sections of the media, that he goes back to his village and dies a few years later of arteriosclerosis, a lonely, unhappy man. And what we know is that his wife burnt every paper that he possessed and left virtually no record of any of his feelings, writings, whatever. Michael O'Dwyer also finishes his tenure, returns to London, much celebrated, again as the savior of the Punjab for the British. And it isn't until 21 years later that one Shahid Udham Singh accosts him and kills him, and then surrenders to the police, saying, "This was the man who was responsible for Jallianwala Bagh, and I've waited 21 years to have exact my revenge."
I'm going to ask you to close by reading the postcards and Vidya to do that. And, just to again set the context, on the street where the missionary lady was accosted and, of course, rescued by a Hindu family, for the rest of the time, any resident or any person crossing that street had to crawl on their bellies to cross the street in revenge of accosting this. So that was the kind of setting that the British did to try and control
Actually,
the
the
situation.
aftermath of Jallianwala Bagh, which a lot of people don't focus on, is almost as bad. The brutality with which the people were treated afterwards, including the strafing of civilians from a Royal Air Force aircraft in Gujranwala, which again goes down as one of the most shameful episodes of that period.
Which they continue to do in Gaza now, but read.
But this is a set of, as I said, postcards of pain that people are writing into the British government. "Please heed our humble pleas, our Lord. Your hapless folks seek help, our Lord, and so we plead in vain our postcards of pain. Your people face these times so grim, our cup of sorrow fills to the brim, while the Raj rejoices in its reign, our postcards of pain. Sir Rowlett came out of the blue, his bill got passed, none had a clue, and troubles came like a flood of rain, our postcards of pain. O'Dwyer signed the terrible law, a heap of misery is all we saw, only those butchers stood to gain, our postcards of pain. And then it was that Dyer's turn to light a match and let it burn, fired bullets at us with such disdain, our postcards of pain. Our brothers killed without a thought, our leaders arrested and left to rot, fake charges and a smear campaign, our postcards of pain. Our brothers conscripted, sent off to fight in Europe's war to save imperial might. Ah, these battles so inhumane, our postcards of pain. You asked and we sent our youth to die. Each order followed, no whats or whys. Just look at the rewards we gain, our postcards of pain. And it goes on.
Vidya.
It is a beautiful and a long poem, so I'll sing a few verses. रैयत तेरी होई दुखियारी तुध बिन कौन सुने आहो जारी हिंद विच होण वधाइयां चिट्ठियां दरदा दियां चिट्ठियां दरदा दियां रोलट साहिब सी जद आइयां रोलट साहिब सी जद आइयां रोलट बिल चा पास करैया हुर मुसीबत आइयां चिट्ठियां दरदा दियां चिट्ठियां दरदा दियां फिर डायर दी वारी आई, फिर डायर दी वारी आई, जिसने होर मुसीबत पाई, गोलियां ने चलाइयां, चिट्ठियां दर्दां दियां, चिट्ठियां दर्दां दियां। भर्ती कर कर वीर प्यारे, जंग यूरप विच भेजे सारे, होइयां जदों लड़ाइयां, चिट्ठियां दर्दां दियां, चिट्ठियां दर्दां दियां। शहनशाह सुन अर्ज असाड़ी, रैयत ढाढ़ी दुखी असाड़ी, देंदी सदा दुहाइयां, चिट्ठियां दर्दां दियां, चिट्ठियां दर्दां दियां।
Vidya Shah, Ambassador Navdeep Suri, who will be happy to sign the book. Rachel, I just want to say thank you to Avi Grewal and their foundation for supporting this particular tour in America. Navdeep Suri is going to be in Boston and in other parts of the country. Thank you, Avi, for supporting this. And of course, JLF, North Carolina, 2 weeks from here.